Taking the leap into competitive play can be a scary task. Hopefully, with this guide, you'll be ready to make that journey. Hello and welcome to the Bingle Bang Bang podcast. I'm your host Liam, and in today's episode, we're going to talk through how I've been preparing to enter the Pokémon Regional Championships this month in Birmingham. Now, I have been playing the Pokémon trading card game since it originally came out in the UK, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit that this is the first major tournament for this game that I have ever entered into. In the area that I grew up in, there wasn't really that big of a competitive scene, and in fact, we didn't really have many of the organised play events. Luckily, these days, more and more stores are popping up across the country and across the world, and there are just a lot more organised play events. So if you don't know of an area that you can go to play in any of these things, there are a few things that you can do, and hopefully you'll be able to find something that's close to you. The easiest place to go is the official Pokémon website. They do have an event locator that's on there that will show you about any of the stores nearby that have events that are classed in the organised play. Now, whilst a lot of the information I'm going to give you here relates to the Pokémon trading card game, these things can probably translate over to most of the trading card games and collectible card games out there. Obviously, these companies want you to play their games, so they do have a lot of information on their website, including event locators. When it comes to Pokemon, there are a few different events, and sort of the first step is to understand what the terminology is on each of these things and just what they are. So you may see events that are written down that say Pokemon League. Now, a league is just a game night, really. They aren't going to award you any championship points for going there and playing those games, but they are still a fun place to go and to try out your new decks, and to also just meet more people in the community. If you're just getting into things, you can also look out for the introductory sessions that a lot of these leagues do as well, and some, but not all, of those introductory events will have a starter deck for you to use. The current demo decks that exist are Pokemon V decks, so they are probably about to hit rotation in the next couple of months, but that does mean that they might end up having some more demo decks coming in soon. So if you are just getting into things, something to keep an eye out for. We'll talk about rotation in a bit, but for now let's focus on league events. Another type of non-championship point event that you might encounter would be a pre-release event. These happen just before the release of one of the main sets, so sets that are going to have single booster packs. That part is important. You may end up with special sets being released, like, for example, Prismatic Evolutions. That will not have a pre-release for it because it won't be selling individual boosters. In a pre-release event, you will get a build and battle kit, where you have a semi-randomized pack of cards to make up the sort of core of your deck, and then you're going to get some booster packs in that build and battle kit where you can open them up, see what other things that you can do, and that's a way that it just makes sure that everyone's deck is a little bit different. Because of the limited card pool that you have for this event, the deck size is actually 40 cards, and you'll only be playing to 4 prizes instead of the full 6. This does mean that playing 2 prize Pokemon like EXs can be a little bit detrimental, because now your opponent's only going to need to knock out 2 of them to take you out of the game. Prizes for these events normally include booster packs for that set, so that you can just start to build up your collection a little bit more before the actual set releases. And those semi-randomized packs, I say they're semi-randomized, basically they have a theme to them, so it means that you have a good strong core for your deck, and then there will be a promo card in there that will be stamped with whatever the booster set's name is on the artwork. So again, it's a very nice promo card to have, something that you can put into your collection, and that kind of shows which of these packs that you have in your build and battle kit. Moving on to events where you can actually start to get championship points. The first of these that we're going to talk about is the League Challenge. League Challenge is quite simple. You build a deck using the current regulation mark, which again, that information can be found online. So that standard legal deck that you have is something that you'll bring with you. You'll have all of the cards for it. And this is going to be the first time that you're probably going to need to start writing out exactly what your deck list is. Again, using the form that you can find online. For these events, you may have a judge check over your deck to make sure that every card that you're using within there is legal and to make sure that you've not gone over the amount of cards that you can have / over the amount of a type of card that you can have. Now, the amount of players that turn up to these events directly correlates to the amount of championship points that you can earn. Simply put, the more players that there are, the more points that you can end up winning. You will get 1 point for participating, and the first place player will get a certain amount of points as well. Then they have a thing called a kicker, which is basically the more players that are there means the more extra places that get bonus points as well. For example, if there are 4 players at one of these events, then the person who comes in second place will also get some bonus points. If there are 8 players in the event, then the people who get third and fourth place will also get bonus points. So this is why it's really helpful to go to just a league night to meet up with people and play more games. If you start to get to know people, hopefully it means that more people will come to these events and then you've got more of a chance to get more championship points. Another cool thing that you can get from these events as well, again for participating and then for winning or placing high enough, you can get prize packs. Prize packs are a very exclusive item that cannot be bought, and they again will rotate as the championship season progresses. And every single card in that pack is a Play Pokemon stamped promo card. And they have a really interesting pool of cards in them because they have a lot of what are considered the top meta cards. For example, the current packs have a lot of things like Buddy Buddy Poffin, Iono, and even some of the more powerful EX cards as well. Each of the packs also comes with an energy, so it's a great way to be able to build up your deck and just make it look a little bit more impressive. And again, if you open the packs there whilst you are with the other players, then it means that you've got an opportunity to trade with people because you're going to get some potentially really powerful cards, but they're just not the right mix for your deck. The next event up from a League Challenge is a League Cup. Now, these ones happen less often. League Challenge normally happens typically once a month, whereas League Cups are more of a quarterly event. There's normally a higher entry fee for this event, but again, you can get more prizes out of it, and you get a lot more championship points. For example, a League Challenge, if you get first place in that, you'll get 15 championship points. Whereas if you come top in a League Cup, you'll get 50 championship points. There's also a difference in the structure of how the event goes. With a League Challenge, you'll mainly be playing Swiss rounds. Swiss rounds is a best 2 out of 3 format where players are first of all picked at random, and then after that their pairings will be matched on a win-loss ratio. So for example, if you win your first match, in your second match you'll be playing against someone who also just won. If you lose your first match, you'll be playing against someone who also just lost. It's a way to try and keep the games as balanced as possible. Although obviously that's not necessarily true because it could have just been a bad matchup that those players were in. With the League Cup, you'll go through those Swiss rounds, but then you'll end up entering into a top cut depending on where you finish. The top cut is basically the highest seeded players in terms of wins on the Swiss rounds, going into elimination rounds, eventually ending up with a final between the 2 top players. From there, we move on to the next stage up, which is a regional championship. Now, different countries around the world have a lot more regional championships. In the UK, we get 1. This year's regional championship will be in Birmingham, which is close to where I am. And it is important to note that whilst this is the next stage up from a League Challenge or a League Cup, there are no requirements for you to enter into this other than being able to get a ticket and being registered for Play Pokemon events. If you have entered into any of the other Play Pokemon events, you will also need to have signed up for your player ID. The process is very simple. You go online to the Pokemon website, and then you go into the Play Pokemon events, and you sign up to their terms and conditions after reading them, and you basically say that yes, I do want to opt in to these competitive games, and that I do want to have prizes for competing. It's really important to note that part, because otherwise if you say no, then you will not be able to accrue championship points. Now here's where things get a little bit more difficult, because whilst most of the information that you've had so far has come from the Pokemon website, I'm going to say now that I have found it so difficult to try and figure out how to get into the regional championships. I knew that they were coming up, I knew that I could check on the event locator on the Pokemon website, and I knew that the tickets would be going on sale at some point. That's all I knew. I also knew that although it's the UK Regional Championships, that people from countries all over the world would be coming to this event to try and win, because there are so many championship points on the line on these bigger events that people will travel. There are people who will travel for league challenges and league cups as well. They'll try and fit in as many as they can to try and get those extra championship points. Although I don't know that that's as much of a thing now, because the old way used to be you hit a certain threshold on championship points and you have got yourself an invite to the World Championships. These days, however, it's not based just on you hit that number and you're in. Instead, you have to be one of the top, I think it's like 125 players in your region. So for me, my region is Europe, which is obviously a lot of countries. Then the other regions are USA and Canada, that's one region, Latin America, Oceania, and then Middle East and South Africa as one region. USA and Canada and Europe have 125 slots each for their Masters Division. Masters Division is people born in 2008 or before. So that's the highest age bracket and what's seen as the highest level of play, just in terms of age. So they could have 125 people going into the World Championships, whereas Latin America is 100, Oceania is 20, and Middle East and South Africa is 10. Now, you'll notice that on these I haven't said about Japan, South Korea, mainland China, and Asia Pacific regions at all. And that's because they've all got a different organised play system, and so their invites aren't done in the same way. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on how their organised play is. All I know is it's really interesting to look at the meta in the different territories around the world, because where most of the regions that I've spoken about that enter into Play Pokemon events like I do, those decks are all kind of similar. You get some really interesting things coming out, especially with Japan, when they get the sets released earlier. It can also be really interesting to just look at what the popular decks are in the different age brackets as well, but that's a topic for another day. But again, all of that information that I've given to you there, that you can find very easily on the Pokemon website. When you click onto the event locator and you try and go through and find one of these championship events, you will be sent to a different website. In fact, if you go online and you search Pokémon TCG Regional Championships, you may even end up on 3 different websites. But the most important one, and the one that I wish that I knew about sooner, is rk9.gg. If you think that you're going to be signing up for one of these large-scale tournaments, I'm going to tell you now, go to that website, make your account, link your trainer account to it, because you're going to need your player ID to be able to even buy a ticket to compete, and make sure that all of your information matches exactly. Make sure that the name on your trainer account is the same, and make sure that your player ID is the exact same. So make sure that all of those details are correct, and then you'll be able to look and see the upcoming events. And that's the first time that it's going to tell you when tickets go on sale. Sometimes these events can be that popular that the tickets have multiple waves that are released so that it doesn't crash the system and so that they are able to actually get people their tickets. Again, remember, people are going to be traveling from across the world to go to these larger scale events to get those championship points. So I found all of that information, I got really excited, I thought, yep, this is great, I'm going to finally do it, I'm going to finally enter an organised play event, set myself an alarm, missed out on that by, I don't know, it might have been a few hours, went to look onto it, tickets had sold out, and I was entirely deflated. I'd been building myself up to it by going along to the league challenges, and just knowing that this big tournament was that close to me and that I wasn't going to be able to compete was just really heartbreaking. So I started looking into the International Championship, which is the next leg up, we'll discuss in a bit, and I just happened to click back onto the Birmingham Regionals and tickets were available again, so I just did it and I booked it, and that was that. Then I got a little bit more information that came through with the confirmation, gave me start times for the first day of play, gave me a list of the venues, prohibited items, and those sorts of things. You know, just your general health and safety notices. And then it tells me to go onto there to register my deck. So, this is where things become different than a League Cup or a League Challenge. You're not going to be having that paper sheet. Don't get me wrong, I'm still going to be writing out a physical copy, but you need to register your deck online before the games start. There is a cutoff, and I believe that it is the morning of, maybe an hour before or 2 hours before games would start, just in case you want to make any last minute changes to your deck overnight. But then you register that and you lock that in, and then that's your deck. This means that they can check to make sure that every single card that's in your deck is legal, and it means that if they want to do a random check, and I think it's something like 10% of all decks that are used in the event will be randomly checked to make sure that they are what people say that they are. It means that the event organisers have a list on hand for them so that they can check through and make sure that that's exactly what you'd registered. But again, this is done through Arcanine, this is not done through the Pokemon website. There's then another thing that you can click through onto there, and it's all about the event details. Click onto that, and that takes me to another website, which is Fanfinity. And I'm trying to find out where I need to go to basically say that I'm competing. If I have to pick up a badge or anything, where do I go to get that? Where do I go to get participation prizes? Because that's a thing that you get at these larger scale tournaments. And if I'm entirely honest with you, I am yet to find out any of that information. When I do my wrap up from the event, I'm going to give over all of that information just so that people know, because it's just really been a tough thing to try and find out stuff for this. Now, I know that the games don't start until 8:30, but I know that the venue opens from 7:30. So my plan is just get there for when it opens. I've also seen that the event area does open earlier the night before, and I'm guessing that's so that you can go and pick up your tickets and things. So maybe I'll go and have a look at that. But for such a big event that costs the amount of money that it does, it just seems a little bit like it could be presented in an easier fashion. So regional events are normally 2 days, and in a regional event, you're going to start out with those Swiss rounds again, but there's going to be a lot more of them dependent on the amount of players. For example, I believe that there are something around 2,500 players. Now, I don't know if that's just in my age division, or whether that's across the entirety of the tournament. But if it is in my age division, then that means that there will be 9 rounds of Swiss on day 1. And to get through to day 2, I would need to accrue 19 match points. So you'll get 3 match points for a win, you'll get 1 match point for a draw, and you'll get no match points for a loss. That means that I either need to outright win 7 out of 9 of my games, or I need to win 6 and draw 1. That is intense. I'm hoping that I can try to get through to day 2, but as soon as I take a third loss, that's game over. On day 2, there would be 4 rounds of Swiss, so the whole process repeats again until they eventually whittle it down to the top cut, which is an asymmetrical top 8. This is something that they only introduced recently, and as best as I can tell, it means that when it gets into the top 8, they are not pitting their highest seeded players against each other. They're kind of posting them at opposite ends of the spectrum on their win ratios. So with that, you'll end up with quarterfinals, semifinals, and then finals. Now, you might be wondering, why are people this obsessed with going into these big tournaments? Well, whoever gets first place is going to get 350 championship points, and they're also going to get an invitation to the Pokémon World Championships. They're also going to end up with 108 booster packs, which is 3 booster boxes, I believe. And that's not even the most ridiculous part of this. If you win in the Masters division, so again, highest age bracket, first place will get $10,000. That's right, all of those times that we've been told in the past that gaming will never get you anywhere, there's $10,000 on the line. That's the reason why people will travel to these events. That and also that invite into the World Championships. In fact, players who hit into the top 32, so 17th to 32nd place, will get $1,000. 9th to 16th is $2,000, 5th to 8th is $3,000, 3rd and 4th is $5,000, and 2nd place is $7,000. Those places will also get booster packs as well, so it's just, there's a lot on the line in these competitions. The next type of championship event up from that is international championships, and in February there's going to be the European one, which is happening in London. Now these are normally like 3-day events, maybe even longer, and they typically tend to have like a pop-up Pokemon Center attached to them as well. Format, very much the same situation. However, the prize money for the TCG first place on this one for the Masters division is $25,000. More players within that also get that invite to the Pokemon World Championships. So again, you can see why as many people go in for these events as they do. And in the World Championships, that top place prize money goes up to $50,000. The World Champion will also end up having their deck immortalized and turned it into a World Championship deck, which I've got to be honest with you, that's probably up there with like life goals for me. They also get the trophy and all of the other things that you can expect. But to me, I think one of the coolest things that a World Champion can get is just that World Championship deck. Fine, the cards won't be playable in Standard at all, but it's a really cool product to have. They've got special card art on the back of them. You just get to have a boxed product of just the thing that got you the World Championship. Now those are some pretty lofty goals, but let's break it down and talk about how we get to that stage. So step number 1, if you haven't already, go onto the Pokemon website, make your trainer account, get your player ID, and sign up for Play Pokemon. Step 2, go to rk9.gg, make an account, put in your trainer account information and your player ID, and search for upcoming tournaments near you. Keep an eye on when they say that those tickets are going on sale. In the meantime, use the event locator on the Pokemon website, find yourself a local league, and you're starting to get some games in. Now, you're going to need a deck to play with, and you need to make sure that it is standard legal. So, what is a rotation? Once a year, normally some point around the World Championships, the standard legal cards will rotate. This is a way that they can take older cards out of circulation, make sure that the game stays balanced, and obviously keep you buying more cards. It's important to note that this only affects Standard as a format, which is what most of these tournaments are played on. Any tournament that you ever see that is running on Expanded, you don't need to worry about this. At the bottom of cards these days, there is a regulation mark that is stamped onto them. So for example, we've got regulation mark F. Anything before that regulation mark is considered not legal and you won't be able to include it in your deck. The only exception to this is trainer cards. If a trainer card has a reprint in a modern set with a legal regulation mark, then yes, you absolutely can. That means that you can play your base set Switch, because Switch is still the exact same as it was before. But most importantly, it's legal. Now, some older versions of cards may have some different wording, which is where rules errata come into it. For example, the old version of Pokemon Catcher did not require you to flip a coin. You could just gust up your opponent's Pokemon and that was that. Then in subsequent reprints, to try and make it a little bit less game-breaking, they added in the coin flip. You can still play one of the old versions that doesn't say flip a coin, but you must use the current ruling on it, which does say flip a coin. There's a lot of other cards that have these similar things, so it's best to just kind of look them up. But the main thing is just have a look to see what the regulation marks are on cards. And if you've got any old copies, then yep, you can absolutely throw them in as long as they are legal. Basic Energy is another one that you are absolutely fine to use, with one current exception, and that is Fairy Energy. Since Fairy type has now been rolled into Psychic in the Pokemon TCG, that means that Fairy Energy is not standard legal. So again, you'll be able to use Basic Energies as long as they're legal from any past set. So you may have one that you think looks really cool, like for me, I would say the Heart Gold, Soul Silver ones with the evolutions in the background. They're probably one of the coolest ones. If I could run an entire deck with those, I would. So we've got our deck. We know that all of our cards are up to the current regulation mark. Next up, we are going to write out our deck list. Again, using that information on the website, you can download a template. And also it's quite helpful because you'll say what type of event that you're entering into. So for example, standard, you'll be able to write that in. And then it will also tell you what regulation marks are currently standard on this set. When you are writing in your cards, you will have to do the card number as well as the name. So for example, Radiant Greninja would be ASR 46. Because that comes from Astral Radiance and it's number 46 in the card list. If you don't know what to write down for the set, don't worry, again, this is on that deck list. Now, you only need to write down the set list for your Pokemon, and that's just because there are so many different versions of Pokemon that you might be writing down Charmander, but there are Charmanders with 2 different hit points, or 2 different attacks, or 2 different abilities. They need to make sure that the card that you are writing in is A, legal, and B, the one that you say that you have in there. Some people will run one type because of an ability or an amount of hit points, but maybe it's got a higher retreat cost, but then they might also run a couple of one with the lower retreat cost instead, to make sure that that deck always stays consistent throughout the tournament and that people aren't just switching out cards. That's why you have to write down the set number. Trainer cards, as I've mentioned before, whilst their wording might change, they only exist in the form of their up-to-date rules. So you could put in versions from different sets, but they're still going to read as the rule for the modern version. So you have your cards, you have your deck list, you've registered, you're going to need some sleeves, and you're going to need to make sure that they are opaque. You cannot use entirely clear sleeves at an event, because you could have potentially marked your cards and you may be able to cheat by that. Don't worry, there are places out there where you can buy opaque sleeves that have the Pokemon TCG backing on them still. Just anything that is an opaque sleeve. I personally recommend that you just go for a single color sleeve. It will make things a lot easier. And also you will want to bring spare sleeves with you. So if you are taking patterned sleeves, might not be the easiest to get multiple lots of those if you need to switch out a sleeve partway through. So just being able to bulk buy like a pack of 100 sleeves is a lot easier. In terms of which brand is the best for those, it just comes down to your own personal preference. Just try out a few different types, see which you like the feel of when you're shuffling, because you're going to be shuffling your deck a lot. and you're obviously going to be handling the cards a lot, and just see which ones stand up to your type of play the most. Now, a reason that you might have to have spare sleeves is because if a sleeve is damaged or bent or has a scratch on it or any kind of marking, again, that could be seen as you are marking your cards, you know what they are, you have an unfair advantage, and therefore you are cheating. You don't want to be disqualified, you don't want to have any penalties, so just make sure that you have spare sleeves with you, and that if a judge asks you to re-sleeve a card, you can just do that, no issue. For this event, I'm taking my deck fully sleeved. I've got the leftovers from that pack of 100 sleeves to go with it. And then just to be on the safe side, I bought another pack of 100 sleeves of the exact same color. So hopefully we're all good. You're then going to want a deck box with your tokens in it. Again, all depends on what you want to have for your deck box. For this event, I have gone for the absolutely stunning 25th anniversary Pokemon deck box that they did. It's the wooden deck box. The top of it just sort of slides open on a magnetic piece, and then it has a little side drawer that pops out that I can put all of my damage counter tokens into. I just really like the looks of it, and I've been wanting one for a while, and I found one on sale through Chaos Cards, not affiliated in any way, just literally found it on there for, I think it was 40% off. So yeah, if you've ever been looking to pick that up, have a look on there. So the tokens that you're going to need are, you're going to need a randomizer. Typically, this is a dice. Although it says coins on all of these things, you typically are going to roll a dice instead because it's easier. And it's the whole thing of heads is evens and tails is odds. That way, when you roll a 6, you're rolling the highest number, and it's normally if you flip heads. That's kind of how that whole thing works. Then you're going to want something to track damage with. The best thing for these are the damage token or damage counter dice. They have different amounts on them, so you're able to get up to all of the weird numbers of damage that your Pokemon might take. If you are playing a Charizard deck, remember you have 330 hit points on your Charizard EX. Bring enough dice for that to take 320 damage, and enough if other ones of your Pokemon also get damaged. Then you're also going to need status condition markers as well. So again, you will want a poison and a burn token. Normally these are acrylic tokens, one of them being the orange one to signify burn, one of them being the purpley one to signify poison. Since paralysis and sleep and confusion are all done by card position and the degree in which it is turned, these are the only two that you're going to need those status counters for. Here's an important thing and a way that you can easily pick up these items. All of these are included in a Elite Trainer box. So, if you buy an Elite Trainer box, you will get all of the stuff that you need to play Pokemon at that competitive level, and all of the things that are completely legal to use in a tournament. The Charizard EX League Battle deck also came with all of those, so I mean, I would just recommend, if you haven't already got it, go and buy that deck. It's got Prime Catcher, which is a great tech card. It's an ace spec, so if you don't own an ace spec card, where you can only have one in your deck, just have that. Charizard EX is obviously, it's a very powerful deck, and it also comes with that Pidgeot EX as well, which is a fantastic utility Pokemon to put into a deck for searching. So yeah, if you haven't bought that already and you're looking to get into competitive play, you'll get all of your tokens and you'll get a really solid deck. Then for the current round of tournament play, you're also going to need a V-Star Power token or counter. This is just something to signify when you have used your 1 V-Star Power for the game. Here's a helpful little tip for you as well. Even if you do not play a V-Star Power in your deck, take a token with you, put it out on the table. Your opponent does not know the contents of your deck. If you turn up to the table and you don't put out a V-Star Power token, your opponent knows you don't have any V-Star powers to use in the game. They don't have to play around that. If you have a V-Star power token out on the table and you don't use anything, they're going to be waiting for when that's going to happen. Eventually, they might, after 2 or 3 games, see enough of your deck and kind of realize that you don't have it. But by not bringing that token to the table, you are giving your opponent more information. Equally, they could be doing the same thing to you. They could be bringing a token, they don't have a V-Star power, but you can see that and you're going to think, oh, well, they have the possibility to do it. Since they are so old now as a concept, you can get the card version that comes in booster packs that had Pokemon with V-Star powers in them, so V-Star Pokemon. And again, that acrylic counter, I think, came in Elite Trainer boxes and League Battle decks as well. You can also just pick them up online in places. I still have my Tag Team GX Metal token, which I just really love that thing for the GX move. I really enjoy it. I kind of wish they'd brought those things back, but we'll see if they bring anything in the new EX era. So you have all of those things, and then the main thing to really do is practice. You're going to want to practice playing with your deck. You're going to want to refine, make sure that it's got that level of consistency. Just really start to understand what your combos are, what your ideal first couple of turns of setup should look like. And yeah, just play as many games with that deck as possible. You need to be comfortable knowing what cards are in there, especially important when you get to search through your deck for the first time. If you're using something like a searching ball or an ability, you're going to want to know enough of your cards to look through the deck and know exactly what those 6 prize cards are. So then you can start to play around and see, how will I play the rest of this game without access to these 6 cards straight away? Now, there are a few different ways that you can do it. Obviously, there are the league battles and clubs and things that you can do, or casual games with your friends, which I definitely recommend that you do, so that you can all kind of help each other to get your decks in the best possible position. But one of the ways that I've personally been practicing, and some people may disagree with me on this one, is Pokemon TCG Live. Now, TCG Live is a free-to-play game. You can play it on your computer, you can play it on your phone, you can play it on your tablet. Whilst I am on the commute to and from work, I am going on there and I'm just testing out my deck. You can pretty much make any deck on there if you have got booster pack codes sitting around at all in your collection. Scan them in, open up packs. The more cards that you end up getting into your collection, once you go over the limit of 4, those cards will turn into in-game currency. The in-game currency can then be traded in, and you can basically just exchange them for cards that you haven't pulled from any of the booster packs. Now, I do get through a fair amount of booster packs, I'm not going to lie to you, as I'm buying physical cards quite a bit. So that means that I was able to make my deck quite easily. But maybe you don't know what cards that you want to buy yet. You can still do it by just playing through, doing the ladder, getting free in-game currency, and then trading it in for those cards that you think that you might want to go and buy. It is a really solid tool to use to just play more games with it, especially when you are trying to refine a deck. Or if you want to test it out, it's like using proxies, because obviously it's not the physical cards, but it gives you an opportunity to try before you actually go out and invest in Pokemon cards, because Pokemon cards can be very expensive. You don't want to get partway through playing with a deck that you've gone out and bought and then suddenly go, nah, I'm actually not feeling this. So for reasons like that, I really enjoy Pokemon TCG Live. Yes, I'm aware that it crashes. That is a thing that happens. We won't get into the whole debate on whether Pokemon TCG Live or Pokemon Trading Card Game Online is better. They're weirdly different beasts. I will say that deck building and testing is a lot better in TCG Live, just because of the fact that you can trade in currency for specific cards. But as much as playing an online game is helpful, that's not going to prepare you as much for a tournament as playing physically will. You're going to need to play physically because you're going to need to get that experience in. Players across the table assuming that you know what every single card in their deck does. Speed playing, knowing when to scoop in a best 2 out of 3 to give yourself enough time on the clock to be able to get more wins. Like if you are losing a first game, don't just try and stick it out. You are going to run out of time to then try and pull back a win. You need to know, I'm not going to win this game. I will concede here, hope that I can win the second game, and then try and get into that third game and close it quickly. And you are going to want to consume as much tournament media as possible. Pokemon have a lot of live streams on YouTube and Twitch. You can go through, you can find all of their previous videos from major tournaments. It's very good to watch those because you get commentary from people in the community who actually know what they're talking about. Some of them are still in the competitive circuit, others have kind of retired from the competitive circuit, but they all know what they're talking about. And they can almost always see a play before it happens. And the more that you watch these streams, you'll be able to do that too. It's also just really helpful to know what cards do. So nobody is expecting you to know what every single card in the game is. But having a good working knowledge of the most common cards, and especially the most common cards to a specific deck, will help you to be prepared for the stresses of a big tournament, and also just to be a better player. To just cross over to Magic the Gathering here for a second, as the professor would say, reading the card explains the card. That's true, but seeing the card in action also, I would say, explains the card. Watching these streams, you'll get a good idea of what the meta is. People will often talk about that. All that it really means is just what are the most popular decks and what ones have the most success at tournaments. A lot of the time at these big events, you are going to run into people playing these same decks. Occasionally, there may be a rogue deck that turns up that nobody's expecting. But unfortunately, because it's not going to be as well playtested or refined, normally they're not going to be ending up in the top positions in the tournament. It's not to say that it hasn't happened. It does happen, and it can happen, but there's a reason that these meta decks are as popular and as powerful as they are. It's just because, yes, they are that good. As for what deck I'm going to be playing in the Pokémon Regional Championships, I will tell you next time when I do the catch-up. In the very off chance that any of my potential opponents would be listening to this podcast, it is probably a very silly idea for me to talk about what I will be using. But what I will say is, although I am going there to compete, I am going there to have fun. So maybe I'm not going with something that is a completely meta deck. I like to have a lot of moving parts and a lot of weird things in my decks to surprise people. And so I've just stuck true to my deck building nature, and that's what I'm trying to pilot. So yeah, I will let you know how that goes in the next episode in 2 weeks' time. But let me know whether I should be expecting to see any of you there. Do you have any tips for people who are just looking to get into competitive play? What are some of the things that you wish that you had heard sooner? And how have you found competitive play as a thing? Did you find it easy to get into, or has it been a bit of a challenge? And I'm not just talking about the websites that we have to try and locate where an event is. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and all of those nice things. take care, and thanks again. Bye bye.